So now regarding the filming of the movie, there are two main locations that the movie was shot in. It was Turkmenistan. I'll just go back to the map. So Turkmenistan, and specifically the town of Mari, the ancient Merv, which was a very, very important point on the Silk Route between China and the Persian and Roman empires. Very interesting city with very glorious and old history. So that was one location. And the second location is on the western side of the Caspian Sea. Since the location of the whole movie is not specified, it doesn't really matter. But we will keep jumping in the film between this place and that place, although the whole plot belongs to one place. But it doesn't matter in the film. So the ancient city of Merv, the opening sequences and the desert shootouts and everything, they were shot in this place. And one of the opening sequences shows the historical fortress Karakiz, famous for its ribbed walls. It's half ruined. You will see it in one of the opening sequences. And the second location on the western shore of the Caspian Sea, it's all the sea-related sequences, including the dynamic and bloody finale of this whole drama. And also you will see the authentic Islamic tombs in the city of Merv. They will also be shown, so they can be seen even today, although it's not so easy to get a tourist visa to go to Turkmenistan. But the place can be seen. It's a very interesting place, and those Islamic tombs can be seen too. So the story of the film is a series of serious challenges. So first of all, several directors who were offered the script refused to take it up, including no less person than Andrei Konchalovsky, whose film was screened not so long ago in Paradiso. So he felt it was a very unauthentic story, and why should we make some kind of Russian Western? It simply doesn't look good. So he refused. So the first script was found unacceptable by the film company. It was the biggest film company in Soviet times, Mosfilm, the Moscow-based company. The first script, they just cut it down to size. They were very unhappy about it, so the script had to be reworked drastically up to 60%. And even despite this gigantic reworking of the script, a lot of things had to be improvised on the spot. Filming, as you can see, was very challenging. So it was a Moscow-based company. So there were no local people, and they had to work in desert condition, in summer. Summer there is something like summer in Delhi and Punjab. So we are talking about 40 degrees at least, plus the desert landscape. It is all parched. And you can see what kind of challenges the team was facing. It's a very interesting shot. It's one of the sequences at the very start of the film. We are going to see it shortly. So having to divide your time between two shooting seasons, two locations, they could not really shoot it in one summer. So they had to shoot the sequences in Turkmenistan in one place and on the other side of the Caspian the next year. And then they took another almost a year for editing the film. So in the end, it was a very long story. 2.5, 3 years to have a movie with a rather small cast and simple story, to have it released in the cinema halls. That was quite something. What was even more interesting, the crew lacked equipment. They wanted to have a crane, they couldn't have a crane. all resources of Mosfilm were diverted towards shooting a war epic, which was, it's a big studio, so several projects were running parallelly, but that was the priority, not some kind of small budget western. So in the end, the crew didn't have a crane and some other things. On top of it, some equipment was stolen on the sets by the local people. On top of it, the actors kept getting into drunken brawls with the local people in the pubs. So there were all sorts of stories, and there was one death also on the sets. One of the stuntsmen suffered from an accident, so there are a lot of horse riding sequences. You will see one of the stuntsmen, even though he was a professional, lost his life. And when all of it was finally finished, the censor board put their foot down, and they were very unhappy about certain things and demanded that they be cut. So there has never been something as the complete version of the film. So before we go over to the characters and actors, I'll just take a couple of minutes to say a few words about the director. So the director, Vladimir Motyl, by the way, from Belarus, he was of Polish origin. He comes from a theater background. He himself played in theater. We will see that a lot of actors actually in this film come from the theater background. He had an enormously long career of almost 50 years, but over 50 years he made not more than 10 full-length feature films, which makes him not very prolific, but still memorable. But his claim to fame, at least among the public over there, rests entirely on this picture. So for him, it was a turning point. So now, regarding the characters, we have 5 characters, including the main character in the center. And the whole story rotates around them. The main hero of the story, it's a Red Army soldier who is called Comrade Zhukov. He's a seasoned soldier. Some of his remarks suggest that he has seen a lot of action. Since it's the end of civil war, we may presume that he has seen enough of Russian civil war, and his head above his comrades in arms when it comes to combat, when it comes to tactics, when it comes to dealing with the enemy, even though he seems to be a simple private. But his experience definitely makes him far above the private. He knows the terrain, he knows the local people, but he's never really arrogant despite that. A lot of people would be arrogant when they feel that they're one step ahead of everyone else. He comes from a peasant background back in Russia, and like a lot of peasants, he's a very down-to-earth man, and he does his job when it comes. And now he's a soldier, so his job is war, so he takes it head on. He just rolls up his sleeves, and without complaining, he goes about this business. He has finished his tour of duty. He's returning home. He's in no mood to fight more. He wants to go back to his wife, but suddenly he finds himself, suddenly but not entirely, unexpectedly, because it's still a war zone, he finds himself in a very, very serious pickle. So the role that was played, this role was played by a veteran actor, Anatoly Kuznetsov, who did several dozen films during his career and was a professional actor, film actor, although again he comes from a theater background, but somehow coincidentally, again, largely in the popular imagination, he is remembered in connection with this film. In the popular consciousness, that was his best film ever. So, Comrade Zhukov's quite unexpected helper, his man Friday, is the local man. He's an underdog. He's called Said. He's also a man of honor. He's torn between the personal vendetta to revenge the death of his father and also to return a favor to Comrade Zhukov, who saved his life. We've just gone through the list of tropes in Westerns, so return of the favor of saving life is very much there. So as we can see from this picture, he looks at the surface, on the surface of it, quite unimpressive. You see his kaftan is torn and patched and you know, you may not give him the time of day when you meet him in the street, but make no mistake, he's a deadly crack shot, and he proves it more than once in this film. He doesn't talk much. The words are clearly not his medium. In fact, if you see the whole film, he shoots more than he speaks. And that makes him a kind of Central Asian avatar of Clint Eastwood minus the cigar. There's no cigar here. The character is played, even though he looks very Asian, I think he looks Asian enough to me, the character is played again by a Russian actor, again from a theater background. And I really feel like I keep repeating myself, but even though he made many films, he is again remembered only for this role somehow. I'll have to keep repeating it again and again, but bear with me because that is true. A very interesting character, Pavel Vereshchagin, a border customs officer on the shore of the Caspian Sea, another man of honor here, who has worked all his life for the Russian Empire, who was needed, who respected this empire, and now he finds his country in shambles, and there is no more customs, and the country and its property, everything is ripped apart and pilfered, and he lives with a sense of pain for his country that he loves, that he has served his entire life. Basically, he finds himself retired, but somehow he doesn't want to retire. He spends his time, surrounded by his peacocks in the garden, and he has a wife, but he is a man of action, and he doesn't want to retire. He doesn't want to find solace in his home, eating black caviar. He doesn't want find solace in the arms of his wife, who is, by the way, a very devoted woman. He is a man, and his blood boils when he encounters injustice, and that's the sentiment that pushes him into the fray. And he doesn't want to miss his last fight, and he prefers to go down with a bang rather than whimper. The actor who played this role, it's Pavel Luspekayev, an ethnic Armenian, by the way, coming from the region of Lugansk, which is unfortunately very much in the news these days. Again, from the theater background, his story, as far as his life and this film is concerned, is very tragic. During World War II, he was a guerrilla fighting Nazis in Ukraine, he got his feet frostbitten, and by the time he reached the stage of this movie, he had his toes amputated, and he was going through the filming of this picture, fighting every moment against this excruciating pain. He basically could not walk. So when we see him acting, and particularly walking, please remember that he was shooting and struggling with himself. In fact, his wife, who was there on the sets, was carrying a stool after him so that he could rest every 20 steps. It was that bad. And so that made the whole image very believable and very dramatic. And very unfortunately, he passed away almost immediately after the filming of this picture. And a very talented actor, probably much more talented than any of the men we have seen. Another of Sukhov's Men Fridays, Peter, Petrucha, the diminutive of Peter. I don't know what would be in colloquial English the diminutive of Peter. Would it be Pete? Yeah, so we can translate Petrucha as Pete, little Peter. A young recruit in the Red Army, completely innocent man who hasn't seen any action, who is probably just 18, totally helpless. His rifle doesn't shoot properly, so one can ask a legitimate question like, how is he surviving there? And there is no answer. So, but even though he is a caricature on what a soldier should be, he is a caricature on his comrade in arms, Sukhov, which makes him a kind of buffoon or vidushak of Indian drama and cinema. Ridiculous as he is a very honest and very sincere boy, very well-meaning, and he gets punished for his sincerity. So the role of this innocent non-soldier who finds himself in the uniform and in a very unlikely place was played by a man who was completely amateur, a man of very strange career who had two passions in his life, acting and crime. And he did 20 films and did 3 jail terms alternately. So he would do a film or theater, and then he would get himself into a brawl, go to jail, then come out, go back to theater. His main source of income was, he worked as an electrician, which probably he didn't care about. His passion was stage, theater as well as cinema. And then again he would get into some crime, not just brawl but even theft or burglary, and again he would go in, again he would come out, and that way he continued till 2000s. But again, and I'm repeating myself ad nauseum, no role sticks to him as much as the role that we are going to see today. And there is really something very endearing about this unlikely hero. And the last character I'm going to talk about is Black Abdullah, or just Abdullah. So he's the villain in this story, and I put him at the very end not because he's insignificant, but rather as a sweet dish at the end of the dinner, because he's an extremely colorful character, probably the most colorful character of this bunch of colorful characters. So you can already see that he is a warrior, he's a ruthless killer. For him, taking human life is as easy as spitting. He would not hesitate even a moment. He has his own idea, traditional local ideas of honor, what men should be, what woman's place is, He comes from a background similar to Said. He comes from a very poor background, but he made himself a gang leader. He is rich. He's been riding for a long time and shooting, and he does it with gusto. He really enjoys it. Interestingly, none of the characters, even those who played the local people, were depicted by the local people themselves. There were no Turkmens in any significant roles there, and this hero, the role was played by a Georgian actor who comes from another side of the Caspian Sea, and in the Caucasus in general, the people are very, very masculine, tough and macho, and with very, very sharp sense of honor, family honor, personal honor, the honor of your ethnic group, the honor of your religion. And even though as a Georgian he doesn't represent those values to the utmost, he still got into this role. Like in the Caucasus, people of this kind would really fight to the end. They would fight with gusto. They would really enjoy facing a tough adversary. They may be on completely side of the barricades, but they will have respect for a person who is on the other side of the barricade, but exhibiting the same values of toughness and masculinity and honor as they do. And he's prepared to lose everything, but to play till the very end. And you can see this one of the iconic shots, like pun intended, where he gives a shot from the Mauser pistol and with this bullet shell coming out, but there is this sense of pleasure on his face that, you know, finally there is a fight. There is a fight with a worthy opponent. And so you can see he's not devoid of beauty, with this very, very sharp-featured face. His character, you know, he reminds me somehow of the figures coming from the same Central Asian region that we probably all know from our history books. The figures like Babur, the figures like Tamerlan, who were ruthless and who were prepared to do everything to survive and to get to the top and remain on the throne, except that he's on a obviously much, much smaller scale. A touch of humor is added to the story by introducing Abdullah's harem, the trope mentioned just earlier, that one of the Western tropes, the abandoned harem that the hero has to take care of. So there are 9 of them, and so the hero has to take care of them, and there's a lot of misunderstandings between them, because they don't quite understand what this taking care of would mean in their case. Interestingly, none of these local wives of Abdullah were played by local women. They were all played by Russian actresses. So just to complete the story, we are coming to the end of it. There are not so many films, I guess, that present an enormous contradiction between the popularity in the masses and the lack of official recognition by the authorities. The films that were buried somewhere in the archives, or the films that were not really promoted by the powers that be. So surprisingly, this film is one of them. Its popularity was immediate and enormous as far as the ordinary cinema goers were concerned. But the establishment were not very enthusiastic about it somehow, and the very fact that finally the film was allowed to run in the cinema halls was due to the interference of the Soviet Premier Brezhnev. And that would probably surprise you, because Brezhnev liked action movies, particularly westerns. A lot of westerns were not available to the Soviet public, but they were available to him. And in accordance with the tradition of the time, he demanded that he should have a private viewing of this film, and he said, "Oh, that's good, great, of course, give it green light." And the film started running. But from 1970, when the movie came out, to 1991, when Soviet Union went down, the film did not receive awards, and the team did not receive awards for this film. The director received awards later for some other work. Actors, some of them, those who were alive, received awards for some other work, but not for this film. And on the contrary, it was in the 90s that it received official recognition, and so much so that awards were given, and then the monuments were erected to the heroes of this film, just like we have monuments to Sherlock Holmes. So there are monuments to the heroes of this film. So thank you very much for your patience. I won't take more of your time. Please enjoy the viewing.
For the last 30 years or so, when the astronauts they go to space, space missions, it's a custom to watch that movie, specific movie, just the night, in the evening, just before going, because it brings good luck. There's some story behind it, but it's really cult movie. When it was released, like it was shown by more than 50 million people. It's quite amazing, and so now even more these days. So it's really a cult movie in Russia. The hero is not a cowboy, he's a Red Army soldier. The Indians, they are not the bad guys, they are not the Indians, they are the local workmen. But the parallel, I think, is very obvious. And it's also, as Philippe was pointing, like the political background behind a lot of westerns. Traditional westerns was the spreading of the good values of America, like the very conservative values of America. And here, the good guy, even like if it's very opposite, because Soviet, he was dreaming about that was so funny, like this scene with the hammer and the sickle. He was dreaming about this revolution and all, to spread the good word. But he was himself a very lonely, individualistic hero also. But who was that hero who had these values and all, he fought for it, just like in the westerns also. The cowboys, they fought for what they think were right for them. Individual freedom, money, here it's different. The pattern, the narrative point of view is very similar.
We spoke about having impressions and influences that we carry on, drawing parallels. But isn't it obvious that if we see something or if we experience something, then it's going to evoke something in you, and then you're going to express it. So how can we say that it's plagiarism? It will be having influences or impressions. It's so difficult to differentiate between having influences or impressions, because when we see something or experience something, then it invokes something in us, and then so it's gonna express itself through us. So it's not really plagiarism.
Plagiarism, no, like this one is original script. It's just the genre, the setup, which is pretty much a Xerox of the westerns. But the western, as I said, like it's a very flexible genre. It's actually, there are so many sub-genres of westerns. This is just one of them. It's very rich, so that you can put a lot of things. But basically, this is mostly entertainment. It's, I think it's very successful as a fun watch movie with a very good historical background for us who are not used to this side of the history. We can see after, so this sets up in the 20s, I believe, in Russia. In order to tell that story, you can pick romantic story, you can pick maybe not science fiction, that it wouldn't fit, but you can pick adventure, and so that the western is a very good format for. That's what I mean. So it's not plagiarism, of course. Like I mean, as I try to explain, like the western itself, like it's plagiarism of either the European mythology or even the Japanese mythology. It's globalization somehow.
Alexandra, I was surprised by the space that was given to reading the female role, the wife of the merchant, or whatever, how you want to call it, and then the harem, and how the harem was reading how the relationship between male and female is supposed to be, in contrast to his reading. So there was an intention behind the movie to identify the female role, or it just happened to be that I perceived it like that?
Definitely part of the plot. The director definitely wanted to show the perspective of the heart of humanity. And there was even more, in the original script, there was even more character development of female characters. For instance, it is not clear in the final cut, but in the pre-censored cut, the widow of the customs officer goes mad. And then some other things are also there. And there is more character development of those faceless Oriental women. Just that it was even reduced from the original, from the director's cut. And it was definitely done deliberately. And definitely, as far as the harem is concerned, the whole story is around it. They may not be very well portrayed, but the whole story is because of them and around them. Then the introduction of the customs officer's wife and their relationship, because there is a backstory there, which is you can glean it from the exchanges and from the reactions. So that adds to the drama, because he has to make a choice of retiring, living out with his wife in peace, or helping out someone to whom he took immediate liking. her presence there added to this drama. The choice became a choice, otherwise it wouldn't have been there at all.
So was it there a political reason, according to you, that stimulate the writer or the script to work in this direction? Because I think if there were so many countries with different approach towards women at the time in the Soviet Union, so many approaches depending on population, was it there an intention to indicate on how, and so discussing other ways to approach, or nothing like that?
I'm not sure, but in general I can say that female characters were extremely important in literature at that time, in cinema. Women were promoted in all walks of life, and there was definitely, that was a political angle. They were made equal in terms of their work burden, in terms of their pay, in terms of their educational exposure. And they had to be represented adequately in art, in cinema too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Either anecdotic or they just like serve as
Decoration.
or let's say something which makes the characters run after. So like let's say a narrative tool, which like is there. But there's also like a little bit of political thing when the hero tries to explain them that they are not just harem women now, but their comrades are equal. And right after, like he starts giving them orders because like he's the chief. So that's the ambiguity of this setup, basically. Obvious that it's second degree. We should take it towards second degree. It's not realistic by any means, just like a few ideas here and there. Just wanted to say that the 69 was made in 69, so even in the US there wasn't hardly any revisionist westerns. So like revisionist would mean like taking the counterpoint, like challenging the vision exposed that it's just the white man civilization colonizing the West. So the revisionist would mean typically taking the view stand of the other side of the Indians and showing the atrocities done in that name. That's what we call the revisionist Western. It's very original. But it comes after this.
Yeah, I want to say